So Leah got to speak at Good Morning Slow the other morning on Thursday, and I loved Jim D'Antona announced her by saying, it's that time of year again, like the museum is changing their mural, and I love that there's been this rhythm to the murals, and this is now our third one. So we were going to do a walk, but then we were worried about the rain, and then we set all this up, and so we'll be inside. But I encourage you after we're done in here for you to walk around with all the knowledge that you've gained from Leah's insights. As I said, this is our third mural project, and we couldn't do all this work without our generous sponsors, including the MUSC Trust. This year, for the first time ever, Sherwin-Williams gave us all the paint. There was a lot of paint, so we're very happy about that. Shirley and Mike Ritter, Pat and Laura Mullen, who graciously hosted Leah for the month that she has been here. Am I missing anybody? Bert and Candy Forbes. City of Slow are all of our favorites. So this morning is meant to be very casual. Please interrupt, ask questions. Leah's gonna talk a little bit about some of her past projects and some of her vision for the mural that's happening right now. So without further ado, our beloved 2023 mural artist, Leah Rosenberg.
Okay, well, thank you for having me here in your city and on your museum walls. I know them intimately, I'm happy to say. And we were slightly set back by the weather, but not to worry, we're moving right along and should all be done by Monday. So, but there's plenty to see on all sides, so yeah, it is good. I am living and working in San Francisco for the last 17 years. I grew up in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, which is right in the middle of Canada, north of Montana. It is, on the license plates, it says Land of the Living Skies, because it is completely flat. And so the sky takes up a lot of your view, which is not a bad thing. I actually think that that impacted a lot of my love for color and sort of like investing the landscape or space with things of your imagination and kind of paying closer attention to those things. So I start with that only because I want everyone to know where Saskatoon is. My mom will be happy. And just to say that the landscape means a lot to me, and here is very different than Saskatchewan in that there are many hills. I sort of tell this anecdote that the only hill in Saskatchewan was one made completely of trash that the senator started for kids to ski down. So that it's different here, and it's no less colorful. So I do have a back, I already messed it up. Okay. Oh, here, okay. I went to grad school. I moved from Canada to go to grad school for art at California College of Art in 2006 for painting. And I would layer layers of paint down on panels, take them outside, sand them down, layer, sand them down. And that got me to a year of unfinished paintings and a little bit of dissatisfaction in the sort of engagement with some of the students. And so I decided to start taking cake decorating classes on the weekend to see if maybe some of the techniques could overlap. So I started bringing these full cakes back to the painting critiques. And the response was one of delight. I mean, we have donuts here today that are delightful. And that became interesting to me, that I was getting the response I wanted from the paintings in these cakes that I was making, but I was making both with the same intention, which was sort of this idea of making something for someone in particular. And so I became very interested in whether I could make painting could painting do the same thing that cake does in terms of offering and consumption and that kind of thing. I wrote my thesis on the artistic possibilities of cake and whether painting could be generous. And I had one professor who said, like, you have to pick one. The cakes are making the paintings saccharine, and the paintings are not doing justice to the cake, sort of thing. And he said, just pick one. And I thought that wasn't as interesting to me. I thought that doing them both simultaneously was actually more, like the question was more interesting. So I did give up cake for a week. And then I decided I went back to it because it's not that I was making, that the cakes were not good at the time. They were more, the cakes look like the paintings look like cake, and I would serve the cakes on these sort of pedestals within the gallery, and there would be a painting that was a little bit more sculptural. And it was hard, I think that sort of a different way of experiencing an artwork. So this idea of the visitor being like, is this edible? Is it not edible? It looks like cake. Is it cake? And then at the end of the exhibition, actually slicing into it to reveal like this colored, layered cake that sort of, in a sense, was a painting. So fast forward a few years, all through grad school, I was working at a patisserie called Miette, and tying ribbons and making things look pretty, and getting people a lemon tart that was like the lemon tart that they wanted, the third from the row. And so there is a lot of actually those interactions made it their way into the thesis, and just thinking about ways aesthetics judgment and how people connect with flavor, how it evokes memory, how there's stories connected to maybe that lemon tart for them, and then how color can also do that in a sense. So I worked there, and my boss at the time married a coffee man, a man who started Blue Bottle Coffee Company in San Francisco. And they were offered a space on the rooftop of SLOMA, which is the museum in San Francisco. And again, I thought, so she asked if I would come with her to start this pastry program. And I thought she was out of her mind because I didn't go to culinary school. I went to art school, and like I said, the cakes were not so delicious. They were, sometimes didn't stand upright, and there were, but I learned everything on the job, and we made a really good team because she was a businesswoman and really knew her pastry. And I had this connection to the art world and understanding that what hangs on the wall is not necessarily the full story. There's also this background of where the artist comes from, the medium, all of those things. So the program was that we made pastries based on artworks in the museum collection and rotating exhibitions. So if a painting, like let's say Frida Kahlo was up, or a Rothko, but it came down, we would then pull the dessert. And it became sort of this way, how many people go to a museum just to see, let's say, a Rothko, to have that experience of sitting in front of it for some time. And they leave with a feeling. It can be spiritual in some cases, and we really wanted to elevate that or extend it. If you're consuming it with your eyes, maybe you can actually consume it with your mouth too. And it allowed us to work closely with some of the curators and actually be on the same calendar as the museum. So it was a lot of research, and I started to see art in a completely different way. I would, take a ruler down to measure, how big this cracker should be, or, and in some cases, it allowed me to actually honor some of my professors or other peers that happened to be on view in the museum. So we would start doing studio visits as well. I mean, the only downfall was that it took me a long time to not see art for what it could be in an edible manner, which isn't a problem necessarily. But I think one of the things I noticed, we worked in this little 6-foot kitchen, and we had sort of as many exhibition catalogs as we did recipe books, and it became my studio in a way for 5 years. And I think some of the, there's a term in the kitchen that's called mise en place, for those of you who have worked in that manner, where you have everything set up so that you know where everything is sort of without even looking. You're not looking for anything, it's all stationed. And I thought, that's not how I work in the studio necessarily. I wish that I did, but it often ends up being sort of everything comes out at once and then it gets tidied up. But I did kind of like that idea of implementing something that has an order or a system to it in the projects for the artwork or even in the studio. And then also that idea of experimentation in the studio, bringing that into the kitchen, which made for some interesting and sometimes complicated desserts. And I think by not going to culinary school, I didn't know what wasn't possible. So anything, the idea came first, I think, and then we figured out how to do it. So the museum closed for a major expansion, and therefore we did try to sort of package some of the desserts, but it didn't make sense to do that without the artworks to see. So my job ended, and I started to do residency programs. I thought, okay, well, for the time that the museum is closed, which was supposedly 3 years, I could sort of focus on art again. And a year later, or 3 years later, the museum reopened, and they had a gala kind of thing, and the theme was monochrome. And I was asked by the event coordinator to do the cakes for 2,000 people. And that was a little bit more, at that time we didn't have a kitchen. I was just making, still making cakes to some degree out of my own kitchen or for special events. And I said no. And this is what came of it. It's 80 cakes, all in sort of this gradient, and just thinking more about color. And so each floor he had designed was going to sort of be a different colored theme monochromatically. And yeah, it was really, I designed the tables, they were fabricated, but I literally took the paint swatches into the kitchen and matched the frosting to the paint swatches, and then they set up like this. So there was a lot of cake, and I don't know what more to say about that, aside from the fact that maybe it was too much cake, and towards the end of the night, as people were drinking more and more, I started to see people taking off with full cakes and just taking bites out of them. So that's when I left. But yeah, Solange played at that, and so it was pretty fun.
Is there a picture of end of night?
I'm going to spare you that. I'm sure online somewhere. So a year and a half later, I was at a residency at Recology in San Francisco, which is a really cool program where they bring local artists. It's a rigorous application process, but the stipulation is that you have to not bring anything that you typically use in the studio into your studio at the dump. Everything has to be pulled from the recycling area. That is a constant influx of trucks unloading and bulldozers pushing it into this pile, and you get a hard hat, boots, a vest, and a shopping cart, and 3 months to collect whatever you can, and then it ends in an exhibition. About a month had gone by, and they have also a program of household hazardous waste, so it's recycled paint. Any time you see like the grays covering graffiti, there's usually like different shades of gray, and so they take all the cool colors and put them into one bin, and all of the warm colors into another bin, and all of the shades of white into another. And so there ends up being this like kind of marbling situation that happens at the beginning, and then it gets mixed up into different sort of warm, cool grays. And that was so beautiful to me. And so I knew I wanted to do something with the recycled paint. And just thinking about how usually I had a process of like color collecting in different locations. Like I would go out and source color based on the landscape or conversations or different changing light. This time the color was literally sort of like unwanted color was coming to me. And then I would try to make something beautiful with it. One day, a year and a half after the SLOMA party, I saw these sticks poking out of the recycle pile, and the palette was very familiar to me, this monochrome pinks and oranges and reds, and it turned out that I encountered my own personal garbage, and these cake stands that were designed for this party a year and a half earlier showed up, and I didn't know where the event coordinator had stored them. I didn't even ask sort of where they ended up. So not only did unwanted color come to me, so did these cake stands. I mean, they were wrapped in this green sort of plastic wrap, and I undid them, and there was even like old frosting still on them. So I knew they were mine. And at first, when I saw them, some of them were really sticking out, and you're not supposed to climb the mound because you could get shish kebabbed, but I needed them. I sat there for a minute, I thought either this is like me having to watch them go, or I have to do what I can to get as many as I can and make them into something else that's lasting. So I took them apart, and I poured the marble, like, I had these 2 jugs that I found. They were sort of like hospital jugs. Would mix the paint into there and then pour over these stands and kind of make something. I also wanted to make something that surprised me. Like, I didn't know necessarily what they would look like when I did the pour, but when I let them dry, they ended up being something sort of like, either they were like a marble or a planet or, I don't know, like something close up or something far away. And so that part to me was also fulfilling. And the result, the stripe that the marble rounds are on are the resulting color from mixing those colors fully. So again, it's sort of like a recipe. Oops, did I? Yeah, okay. So then this was the wall. These cakes, you're standing on this wall. This wall would be looking at the cakes. And this was just in 2021. So I got to go back to SLOMA, actually cake-free, and as an artist. And this was a wall I did as an extension of one of the exhibitions with a friend of mine and old collaborator, Susan O'Malley. And in you'll just tell me if I should wrap it up? Okay. This is like why I love being present in a place and making the work is because there's so much potential for story and surprise the longer maybe you're somewhere or the more sort of invested. So in 2015, I did a residency at a place called Irving Street Project in the Outer Sunset in San Francisco. And it consisted of painting the storefront space 50 times, so for 50 days. It was ended up being a little bit of a different project than I had anticipated because Susan had passed away quite suddenly, and so the layering of that paint ended up being almost like we called it a grief cave. So it was a place where family and friends came and where I think, like, I grew up Jewish, and I'm not religious, but there are some traditions that I find, or rituals that I find are useful in situations like troubling situations, or even just in birth and death, and understanding the way things work. And it became sort of that, like something to do every day, like an action in a way that, and it also connected me to this neighborhood that I typically would go for a treat, like the Outer Sunset, so by the ocean, and usually there's like a nice coffee place, and so I was going there every day, and it was very healing. And I think, so the palette too, I think going back to sort of what makes a generous painting, I often thought like maybe it's to put in every single color. So there's a color there for everybody. Turns out some people don't like all the colors. And maybe it's to layer all of these layers of paint so that you start to see the accumulation and labor that goes into something. And then I thought, even if there are all the colors in there, I'm the one who's selecting them. So maybe that's not it either. And so I like the question of like what makes a generous painting, because it's always changing. There's never really an answer. And this was a palette that was so based on the neighborhood and that particular time. So it ends up being almost like a snapshot of that moment, of that 50 days, or a map, or a portrait of the place. And so some of these colors come from sunset, some of them come from flowers, some of them come from foods, some of them come from like a silly string I found on the sidewalk. I returned to this palette, but in reverse. So the first color that I did at Irving Street Projects was hot pink for Susan, and it was up for a week, just in her memory. And all 50 layers of paint ended up coming off of the walls and were framed then, and that's what was on view in the SF MoMA. So again, this idea of showing up to somewhere every day and then having this like magic surprise in a way. But the hot pink for Susan was the one color that didn't come off of the wall. And so I wanted to return to it and have that color be the expanse in the end. So I literally went in reverse, back in time. And instead of the colors being about the outer sunset, they became really about revisiting, like, and a reflection of that time. And I used Susan and another artist and I did a show called Happiness Is in 2013. And for that, we came up with a set of, a list of phrases that could be healing, that was called Getting Better Every Day. And so they were pulled from different artists' advice and things that are helpful, like I can't even read them right now, but like reminding to breathe and to sit. One of them is describe a beautiful moment to someone who is no longer here. Another one is like when you don't know what to do, draw a circle. So those sorts of things, and I would write that on the wall before I painted it over. And then each of those phrases was then listed here. I amended that list because that list was originally done in 2013, and a lot had changed. We were still sort of like coming out or in the midst of a pandemic. There was a lot of stuff happening in the institution that was problematic, and I wanted to. One of her phrases was like, "Don't look at Facebook for a day or a week," and I was like, people don't use Facebook as much. Like what are some of the things what would that list look like if Susan wrote it today? And so some of them are the same, some of them were a little bit different, and also acknowledging other artists who were actually on view in the museum at that time, so referencing sort of like the cakes based on art sort of. And at the end of the 50 days, there was a big reveal. So the tape was taken down. And here we are. More tape still around. And I think, I mean, a lot of these projects make sense after a certain amount of time. Not make sense, but like sink in after a certain amount of time and being away from it. Like, and right now, I still am in it, I think, and so, I love being here. I love that I've been able to be outside, and you know, I was like, oh, if I'm painting the rainbow, is a rainbow going to show up? Or like these little moments where actually you select a color because it feels intuitively like the right one, and then the sun is setting, and it's like the blue square. Oh, I get to use this. Hang on. This blue square ends up being like the matching sort of blue of when the sun goes down. And like, I think there's a lot of potential for those moments in this piece, especially in that it's up for this whole year, and how much, obviously, the weather can be unpredictable and change. But it has this way of changing with the time, I think. So hopefully, you know, and as abstract, that's why I kind of like abstraction, and why I find abstraction sort of also generous, is that it allows for different people from different places to enter it or make up their own story. And same with color, it's like a universal language, and so you don't need to speak a certain language, you don't need to know about art even to engage with something that is full of color. I, as you probably can tell, like stripes, I think paring things down into, like, especially when using all of these colors and wanting the colors to tell the story, to pare down the form or the shape into something that is minimal, a stripe or a circle, I think allows for more of the color story to work. I am extra grateful for this scaffolding.
You've been on a journey. You've been on a journey with that wall, because it's hard to get a lift to it.
I am currently in the middle of making a playlist to go with the mural, and a lot of it has to do with color, a lot of it has to do with sun and the moon, and then some of it has to do with being not reaching the ground. So, I mean, I think too, when you see this, it's like, it is like a calendar or a clock. Like, it really did evolve from the top down. And also this idea that there is no beginning or end to this story per se. You can start from anywhere, but I do hope that people will approach it from all sides and kind of can do a meander. So on, yes, so this Monterey side, I like using this thing, Monterey, is the setting sun, and it's sort of west-ish facing, is the setting sun, and then the moon rising, which actually when you stand there and you look at the, what's the one with the M on it? The mountain with the M. You can see the moon there, and so I like that they're sort of having a conversation. I was lucky to have some helpers. April, Shay, Mac is here. So that was so helpful. And then, oh yeah, and here's the lift. Made an appearance at the beginning. I'm fully, if anyone needs a driver, I know how to use them.
Very good at driving the lift.
This is the cart. So there are 41 colors in total. It's maybe not enough, it's maybe too many, I don't know, but there's gonna be a story in there. You know, a lot of the colors are selected. I didn't color collect in the way that I typically do. Because it's up for a year and because there's a lot of surface to cover, I think some of it was, I think with the color collecting, sometimes what ends up happening is colors are selected based on historic landmarks or things that have a story that can be good or bad or outdated. And I think for me, there's so many beautiful natural landmarks here that I want to visit, that I'm trying to get to, that have, I wanted to encourage people to go to those, to come here and get what they can get out of artwork, but then what do you take with you when you leave somewhere like this? Maybe you do go there and you think of here, or you are there and you bring it here. I don't know, that those colors can all be, no matter when you're visiting, can be found in here.
Yeah, I'm going to pause you because the museum has to open at some point this morning, and I want to make sure that we can get into everyone's questions. So, inviting everyone to ask questions if you have them. Leo can keep talking, but if you have questions about the mural or her past work, feel free to jump in.
I have a question. In the piece where the paint came off the wall, was that intentional or was it the weight of the paint? And did it all come off as one 50-layer thing?
Yes, it was not intentional. I actually, it happened when there's a public program that I called Fade to White. And so the idea was that everyone who came got a paintbrush and we were all going to paint back to the gallery white, and that was going to be end. And I went to take the tape off of the ceiling and a little piece came off, and I thought, oh, that's great, like I'll take a little sample as a reminder. And then it kept coming off and kept coming off. And I ended up with these full sheets of 50 layers. So one of them ended up being all stripes, another wall is sort of like a mold of a room.
With all the colors embedded.
Yeah. So I don't know, it was some faulty, whatever paint I put on to what the paint was on there. There's no, oopsies, I'm sorry. Okay.
I was just wondering, is that the arches, is that supposed to be the Mission and that's the Rock and Morro Bay, or is it whatever you want it to be?
It is whatever you want it to be. But also,
But you were
yes.
saying landmarks and whatnot. I was just wondering if,
I think, in some cases, like I would walk around here and I found certain patterns. Like there are these like squiggly things on the doors of the Mission Plaza area. And then it's almost like, when that whole idea of when you get a red car and then you see red cars, it's sort of like when you start to do a pattern or you start to use a color, you start to see that everywhere in a way. So I think a lot of it too is like graphically what will capture your attention. But yes, like now you start to see these stripes everywhere. And I was thinking about, there's these sycamore trees that have these little balls on the end that are right by the creek. And so I was thinking of those with the round bits, and definitely like the sunset and that horizon line. And then on the Broad Street side, you see the Nine Sisters. And in a way, I like this idea that you could actually like walk the mall in that moment, and that they're sort of like a parade, welcoming you in. And then on this Mission Plaza side, there are like native flowers and plants. I couldn't fit them all, but I went to the Lemon Grove Loop and saw a wild California peony that was very exciting because they're not around everywhere, and I find them so unique. So there's like little moments like that I think I really like haiku. I think it gets a bad rap, but it does. If you read a haiku about cherry blossoms, you understand that whoever wrote it was writing it while looking at this moment. They were there. And I think that's what color does too. When you see, it can bring you to attention in the same way that I think haiku does. Yeah. I think in a way, there will be a legend. Oh, yes.
I wanted to ask about the paint. You say you have 41 shades of colors of paint there. Did you know that you wanted to order those 41 colors when you started, or did that evolve?
There's always one more color. I think we started with, Taylor and Mac painted blocked out the color at the end. So I knew those colors, and then some of the other ones, we had a design, and then there were a couple of other colors that got added to the mix once I was here, yeah.
First of all, I love what you've done here. It's so creative and inspiring, and it's just beautiful. And when people look at it, at least when we looked at it, it does bring to mind certain things. So you were certainly successful in that. I was just wondering what's next for you.
Oh, thank you for asking. I'm in terms of projects, or in terms of this project. This project? Oh, anything? Oh, I have a window project that I'm working with an architectural glass company, women. It's 2 women owned, and they've been there for the last 35 years in Oakland. And it's 4 floors of windows. That is a really interesting process because the color is sort of like it's a glaze, but it sprays on like a powder, and then they actually fire that glass. So it's not painting directly on glass. It's to me, it's always interesting to use to learn how your work can exist in this other form, or be sort of how it can be the same and different. And then I have been working with a fabrication company called Local Language in Oakland as well. And that's sort of a residency program that ends in a show, but we make an edition, and I have been making a memory game with them. So these paint sheets that I pour, I've been able to cut them into these perfect shapes, and those get inserted into these printed wood blocks. So those are two things that's next, yeah. And then also writing a legend for this place, which I'm really excited about. What else? What else can come from this? Oh, and there's a show in October here. Yeah.
He was first. You mentioned legends, so I wanted to jump in. What do you mean by legend? To describe things, or what? What would the legend be?
Yeah. So in a lot like the way that this functions is kind of like what color or what story goes with what color, just as another way of maybe expanding the idea beyond just graphic color. A little bit more like poetic.
I'm always intrigued on how, as to how these large murals are accomplished. And I think I've asked the same question to our prior muralists, but in terms of the process, do you have a concept? I mean, you've obviously kind of studied the area and looked at things around, but do you end up with a sketch that you work from because you have people that collaborate with you in the installation? How does that work? What's the process?
It helps, it really, really helps to have people like Emma and Leanne to nudge the process along. I think I could be working on something for the rest of my life and never get it onto the wall. So I think at some point, a decision needs to be made, and I think it's a balance of making some decisions prior to, and then making some of those decisions here. I'm not a designer, so I think, I love good design, and I like when things are well designed, but I don't plan it out fully so that all I am is executing what's on the paper. I like sometimes to, what do you say, like veer off the track to make it a little bit more of a, like I was here moment.
And
Yeah.
I'll add that, we have been meeting for 6 months talking about it, looking at images, and there are always, as with the last mural, the mural before that, there's always in the moment adjustments. And that's the sort of exciting and alive part of the process, like standing out there and being like, okay, that seems like a good idea.
Yeah, it's I like that process a lot, yeah.
As we wrap up, and Leah has a gift for all of you. She's that kind of artist. She's so extraordinary that we never want her to leave. But as we wrap up, could you talk about the little nod up on the Broad Street the moon and the...
Oh yes, on Broad Street, it might seem as though, well, it's a breathing space. It's not quite done, but there's a horizon line, and then up on top there's a small moon, and it's a nod to the moon tree in Mission Plaza. So I like little puns and sneaking those things in too. But I think, Leanne and I and Emma discussed there's like a lot going on, and there doesn't need to be that kind of a lot going on on all of the walls, and that part of this too is actually like a breathing space as well. So that's that. There's as much energy and kind of thoughtfulness that goes into a wall with less stuff on it, and just lets your eye rest a little. Oh yes, and so I do need a little bit of help with, I feel like it's not long enough for me to be in SLO, and I'm only here for a certain season, and I will come back, but for those of you who have been here for many, many years and who call this home, I'm wondering if there are certain colors that speak to you or that you might think of SLO. And so on these cards, there is the actual paint color, and I thought maybe everyone could pick one that speaks to them, and on the back, write what it makes you think of. Okay, so up to you, I'll let you start.
Should we pass them around?
Yeah.
Should we leave them at the front desk?
Oh, or leave them at the front, yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's a pen.
We'll put them on the front desk and please engage.
While you eat a donut.
While you eat a
While you
donut. And then do you want to give these out?
Oh, yeah. I mean, feel free, maybe we'll leave these at the desk too. These are everyday confetti calendars. So each day you'll have a little bit of catch up to do because we're further along, 2 months. And then there's a little pocket that you store the confetti in at the end of the year. We all toss it and think of each other. Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
When you came, were the hills green, or have you seen it when the hills are not?
I mean, everything, I love when it rains because all the color just like pops. So I am staying at Pat and Laura's, and there's a creek that goes along, and I've watched the poppies just like open and close, and yeah, that part has been really all the weather.
We're gonna wrap this up, and everyone, thank you very much, Leah.
Thank you.